All right, welcome back to the No Effects Podcast. I'm your host, Izlain, and, well, as you can see, Kirk's not here, but I am joined instead by some fabulous guests. First off, I'd like to say sorry for the absence. Kirk has had a kind of uptick in real life stuff that he's been dealing with, so we haven't been able to get together. We were hoping to try and do a review of Duskmorn, but that might end up just being something we skip over if, it gets too far out, and it kind of already is too far out, so we'll see, but probably not. You may see, a little bit, not necessarily restructuring, but because of this, I've already had a discussion with him about potentially, having other guests, hence this episode, and then, some of the guys that I have on my stream regularly may also jump on to contribute to some of those set reviews or opinion pieces or whatever the case may be. So, that's us going forward, but today, well, first of all, let me introduce my guests. We have, up top, where, I guess, seat 1 would normally be, is our man Bobby B. Fine, that is the owner, founder, tournament organizer for Sanctuary, which has all kinds of socials and things that we'll put in the description down below. Bobby, if you want to throw out a little snippet about Sanctuary or anywhere else they might want to check you out.
Right, yeah, like you said, I run the Sanctuary PDH Discord server and tournaments. Tournaments every other month or so, LFGs. Tons of talking there, all that fun stuff. I'm also on the EDH, RC, CAG, Element OP. Wherever PDH is being talked about, I'm probably somewhere around.
Adjacent, at least.
Yeah.
For sure. Next up is Derek, who is actually a member of the RC itself, and has been a guest on the channel before. Well, I guess all these guys have at some point. But nonetheless, Derek, glad to have you back. A little snippet about the RC where you can find, web pages, things of that nature.
Yeah, so all of our information is pretty much on pdhhomebase.com. It's kind of like the central landing page that we use for anything format promotion related. Got little bios there. It links to the Discord, Facebook groups, Reddit, those sorts of things, so you can get into the community. For those of you who don't know, we have a rules committee in PDH. We have an advisory group in PDH. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of things that need to be looked at. Like, it became pretty obvious when we started promoting a rule set and the format more heavily that there's enough differences from EDH that it is kind of necessary to have something like a unifying body, just saying this is how these things work. Nobody likes kind of these sorts of authority organizations, but it's something that, for example, a good example is, when we have adventures entering the command zone in PDH with uncommon creatures, everyone has a different idea about how that stuff works, and we just kind of have to figure out how it does and pass it down, and that's kind of what we do.
I mean, that's great in a nutshell. And we're going to be talking about one of these other RCs here shortly, but last but not least, my man Gator's up in the house from the Common Theory podcast, also several tournament winning guy, good player, I guess, helps people brew and,
Ish.
Does some cool shit for the community. Arguably one of the coolest guys I know. What's up with your show recently, buddy?
Nothing much, man. As you were saying, I'm part of the Common Theory, me and a few of my co-hosts, and you can find us on all of our socials. We have TikTok now. Franklin has been doing a fantastic job managing TikTok, Reddit, and many other platforms that I am not familiar with myself, because he does it, and he does a great job at doing it. Excluding that, if people don't know already, Izlain, you are our editor, and you've been doing a fantastic job lately, and it's been known. We've got a lot of positive feedback, and I cannot complain, to say the least. So
nice, thanks. The reason I bought these fine gentlemen here, and you might be wondering why all of these competitive Pauper EDH guys, why are these guys here and not some other cEDH guys, especially because you're talking about the RC. And yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do right now. And these guys might not have as passionate of an opinion as I might, but you might have a passionate opinion about things, and that's where these guys might come in. So, with that illusion out of the way, let's move right into it. The ban list for EDH proper was recently updated by the RC, and they decided to ban 4 very powerful cards. And basically the community collectively shit itself half the population rejoiced, and the other half said, "Fuck this game, I'm out," or "Damn, I have no more money. Like all of my money's gone. That was my retirement plan." Like no, and bad investments 101 hashtag. But still disappointing, and I can see why people would be kind of pissed off about losing that. It's kind of like the reserve list thing, and I think more people probably lost more money with the bans that happened here than they did with the whole reserve list promise thing that happened ages ago, which is kind of ironic. But so the bans came down. The cards in question: Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, Dockside Extortionist, and a relatively new card from Modern Horizons 3, Nadu. I can't say that I hate or I dislike the Nadu ban. Like, that was totally fine for me. I fucking hated playing against the deck. But it did do something that I found kind of impressive and mechanically complicated enough to where it was like, I could see why you would enjoy playing it, but it becomes kind of solitaire and it's miserable for other people to watch. And unfortunately, like kind of Krark and Sakashima and other decks before it has that element of it could whiff. So you do all this not deterministic storm bullshit, and then you don't win, and then you pass the turn. And people are like, cool, that was 20 minutes wasted, and they go, this thing, faster and faster and faster, and then they do it again. And then maybe they win this time, or maybe they don't, So, I get it, but also I can see where people would be disappointed because it's a brand new card, and they, like playing it or whatever. So, but that's, again, why Rule 0 exists, I suppose. Nonetheless, Dockside, we all kind of know that it makes sense because it was such an explosive ritual, but it was also kind of a good catch-up mechanic, I think, for like people who were in seat 4. Everybody else shits out, 2-3 artifacts, and Dockside, bam, I got a bunch of treasures. Now I'm, in league with you guys again. So it had its ups and downs. It did kill a couple decks, but like it doesn't really kill them. It's just like their main strategy is kind of screwed up. So I don't know. I'm on the fence about it. Like I'm against bans in general. I would actually prefer that they would start unbanning some of the cards, because some of the cards on the ban list are just like, this doesn't even matter anymore. And then the other fast mana, I hate it. Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus were just fantastic for the format. They opened up a lot of possibilities for higher CMC commanders and things like that. So, yeah, my basic initial reaction was, I fucking hate this, but I wasn't going to quit playing the game. And then, me and people on my Discord and in other Discords, we all started talking, and it was like, well, this makes this better, and this makes that better, and well, this is kind of worse now, but like, this is better, or this could pivot to that, and then we all started thinking about it, and it was like, fuck it, let's see what happens. And then we started playing games, and it's been fine. I've already done a stream. I posted a video just yesterday that, it's fine. As of right now, I'm kind of like, I don't care. It's whatever. But if I would have recorded this when the bans happened, I would have been completely like, fuck this is terrible, I hate everything. So, that is, I guess, the best thing to do is sit on things like this. But so that's my opinion. I don't know if you guys have anything to add, because again, you are the Pauper guys. So, but I do know that Chris Gator here does play cEDH quite often, and I know that Bobby has dabbled a bit. So if you guys have anything else to add to that ban discussion before we pivot.
Yeah, I'm kind of just curious to see what happens in the future. I'm not a fan of fast mana personally, but I get it does enable some more expensive commanders, to see some light they wouldn't otherwise get. I'm just curious to see how it ends up shaking out in future decisions. They talk about not wanting the games to end so quickly, but they're also like, but Sol Ring has to stay because it's the
iconic.
It is the format. So yeah, I'm just interested to see kind of what happens down the road. I feel like this is like a shift that could see some future changes flow from it.
I hope it isn't a slippery slope thing, personally, where it's just like, oh well, we did this, and yeah, people are still playing. So let's just get rid of this other thing that we don't like. Well, if that ends up happening, then the other things that we're going to talk about is what's going to happen for me and maybe some other people. But sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. I was just going to kind of say the slippery slope thing is going to be kind of difficult, because the pieces that were banned were pieces that either push so much mana and or have zero cost, right? So like the closest things to coming like that is like Elvish Spirit Guide, Simian Spirit Guide, and Lotus Petal, right? Excluding that, everything comes with a cost. Mana Crypt, you didn't lose any resources, right? Jewel Lotus? Yeah, sure. Black Lotus, like, it's arguably you don't lose any resources because you gain such an advantage from it, right? So these things are resource generating positives and they never fall into a negative manner. That's also including other cards in the format that allow you to push them even harder and farther, right? So I don't technically disagree and I don't technically agree. I'm just going to continue to play. Did I lose a lot of money? Yeah, I lost a ton of money. I have foil full art docksides. I was in the process of buying a foil textured Jewel Lotus. Luckily, I did not buy it. Did I lose a lot of money? Yes. I take a long time saving, for months at a time, purchasing these cards. And yes, I have foil full art mana crypt, right? I have all of these very high end cards. And yeah, I did take a hell of a hit. I'm not going to say the numbers, but it was a lot. But I think it's a great way to pivot, in cPDH doesn't really have these issues to an extent. So
yeah, and that is basically the pivot point we were getting to, is that a lot of people were upset with the banning for competitive reasons, trying to say that, there is kind of an issue that, like, the top, like, one or two decks didn't really take that big of a hit from losing a couple cards. Rockside didn't even play Jeweled Lotus, I think, because it wasn't necessary, because Roger's free. So I think they lost Crypt and Dockside, and
yeah.
like Dockside was just like a enabler, like post-Nas, basically, sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's just like, cool, okay, maybe it wins a turn slower. Whoop-de-doo. But the general thing that I've seen is that the format has kind of slowed down a turn or two. Like, people aren't hitting that turn 3 win quite as often, or the turn 4 win quite as often, and it's like, that's what they wanted it, to happen. So, for those of you out there who may have not really agreed with this, or are pissed off because they lost as much money as Gator did, or whatever the case, first of all, I would not try to dump your inventory, so to speak. I would hold on to it, because there is that chance that somebody does branch off and does cEDH 2.0 or whatever, and people follow along. But then, there's already been 30 other formats that have branched off from EDH anyway, so good luck. I don't know. Perhaps you just rule zero it with your buddies, or you put it in a cube, or do something with it. But I wouldn't sell. Maybe at some point, again, just being a collector's piece, they go back up. Who knows?
Yeah.
Again, for those of you who are maybe disgruntled's the wrong word, but kind of sick of cEDH, sick of the drama. There's been lots of other things that have happened recently with tournament stuff and this and that and the other thing, so we won't get into that. But I thought that this was a good chance to reintroduce, so to speak, cPDH, which is the competitive Pauper Commander format. Gameplay is very similar to cEDH. Game pieces are a fraction of the cost, and because of the way that the rules work, bans don't really happen all that often, if at all. Like, since I've been playing, I don't think anything's been banned. So, that's a couple years. I guess it had been a couple years since anything got banned in cEDH, so, maybe the big the big one's coming from you guys, but it's not. No, there's no spoilers. Pretend I edit that out. I thought that this was a good chance to kind of like highlight what's good about y'all's format, which it's my format too, but I'm kind of coming from the perspective of someone who's only been playing cEDH, hasn't ever played cPDH. I'm bridged this gap a couple years back, so like it's possible, and I think it's very fun, and it's awesome. And I also don't think you have to leave necessarily. This format has been very welcoming to me. I've helped welcome in other newer players, so overall, I think it's a great format, and I think that if you are kind of pissed off about the cEDH side of things and you don't really like casual, this could be that sweet spot, and with a very small investment, you probably have most of the cards you need to build a deck in your collection already, just rotting in boxes, because who plays commons anywhere anyways? So yeah, just check it out. So in no particular order, I don't have any sort of rhyme or reason as to what we're doing here, except for I thought you guys being prominent figures in the community could kind of point people in the direction of how to get started, what they might expect in gameplay, the sorts of things that we've discussed about like archetypes and other things could be discussed, any of that sort of thing. However, we want to start off.
So I wanted to point over at you, Derek. To be honest, I'd actually love for you to explain, because I actually have a fantastic subject to go into. But I wanted you to explain, the cards that are actually banned in our format, and the life totals and all those things, so people kind of have a way to wrap their head around the format as a whole.
Yeah, so we'll just go over some rules briefly. It's very similar to EDH in terms of, it's a 4-player multiplayer game. You draw a card on your first turn, all that same old stuff you're used to. The biggest differences are we use 30 life instead of 40 and 16 commander damage as a threshold instead of 21. Your commander has to be an uncommon creature. If you play with partners, they both have to be uncommon. If you play with backgrounds, they both have to be uncommon. And then everything in your deck has to be a common rarity card. There's some weird ones like, Faceless One, and there's the background colorless card. Those are special rarity cards. Those are not legal in the format. There's some weird oddities like that. But if you go to pdhhomebase.com, there's a comprehensive rules document that kind of goes through all of the rules that we have, like in a very technical way, so you can kind of see how it differentiates from EDH if you want to do that. Otherwise, we sum it up for you pretty good. And like I said, we've got links to all of the online communities, so you can ask questions and get to know it a little bit better on your own. But as far as ban cards go, there are only 2. Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study, cards that are universally maligned across, the EDH landscape. It's interesting because when in this format, when we look at banning cards, it's a much different thing because we're much more limited in our card pool, and because we're all talking about commons, the power level deltas are very, very similar between like casual games and competitive games. Not necessarily tournament games, but like how Izlain will just pit like cPDH or cEDH. You have fun cEDH games, right? We have that here too, and the power level is much more easily translatable between both ends of the spectrum. So when we choose to ban cards, we can kind of look much closer at how they impact both sides, rather than just being like, we have to focus on the casual end of the format. cEDH is over here. We're going to do things over here. We can actually pay a lot more attention to those things because there's going to be a lot more overlap between how the cards impact both sides of the format. And Rhystic and Mystic were kind of egregious in how they affected everything. They are very taxing in terms of play mechanics, always having to be asking people if they pay the 1, same thing with Smothering Tide, these sorts of cards. They drive everybody into playing blue decks because the power level of those cards is so much higher than the rest of the format in terms of just raw card advantage. It's absolutely wild what those cards can do. And so it just warps the entire format around those cards. So once we formed a rules committee, we didn't have one for a while, and then once we formed it, that was pretty much one of the first things we did was have a vote on banning those cards, and we did, and it's been a pretty big success story for the format. It's opened up a lot in terms of what you are able to do. I don't mean able as in we're gonna put a gun to your head and say you're not able to play these things, but you can feel comfortable playing things outside of those cards, and it's opened up the format in a lot of really good ways.
Yeah, I can't really imagine a world where that was good for Pauper, because then literally if you're not playing blue, you're not doing it right.
Yeah, what's the point? Those cards are so powerful. There's really no good reason unless you're trying to do something very specific or novel. Yeah.
Well, and people even on the cEDH side of things would probably argue that if you're not playing blue, you're doing something wrong. Sure. In some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, those cards get no weaker when you move out of Pauper Commander.
Those are the other powerful ones besides what just got banned. Those are the things that are up for discussion the most. Besides maybe Thassa's Oracle or Consultation.
Yeah. Those cards have a really negative impact in a lot of ways, and I understand that on the EDH side of things, it's much more complicated, much bigger format, much so many more externalities to consider. But for us, it's almost a no-brainer.
They have thankfully kind of given in at least cEDH, they've given the other colors better card draw and more options and more triggers and more other things that just incidentally get you cards. It's gotten to the point where you can not be in blue and still draw some cards, but you're maybe not going to draw as many cards. You're not going to draw as many cards, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably the case in Pauper. There is no equivalent. So if you weren't on blue, you were just not drawing cards, and everybody else was just wait, hey.
Card advantage in this format is very different. There's not a lot of ways to just bulk draw a ton of cards. If you're going to set up big card advantage engines, they take multiple pieces. It's pretty fragile, like it's very interactable. Whereas with like Ristic Study, you just pay 3 mana and then you just kind of just accumulate cards for free. I was talking about this with Dave, one of our other rules committee members. He was playing a deck with a creature, Shoreline Stalker. I forget what it's called. It's a rat from Bloomburrow. It's a 1/1 unblockable. When it deals damage, you loot, and if you have Threshold, you just draw a card. He had like a Ophidian Eye on it and the Cipher spell that draws you a card, and so he was like attacking with it and swinging, connecting, and drawing like 5 cards. It takes like 5 cards to do that, you know?
Right.
So there's a lot more of like engine building in this format to kind of compensate. And if you're able to do that stuff, it's obviously very, very powerful. Like card advantage is much harder to just like generate raw. But if you're able to do it, it's very, very good. And oftentimes win you games.
I mean, ditto everything Derek just said. It's one like that's what Drew like. We talked about, you know, the power level was flatter, but you know that doesn't mean not powerful. I guess I just want to add that little caveat there. Like, we have games ending on turn 3. We have potential turn 1 and turn 2s in Magical Christmas Land. They're not ending as early as frequently as like cEDH games tend to do, but you know, you still get to have like, you know, those busted games. You can still combo Malcolm Kedis, you know, for as good as that deck is in cEDH, it's good in cPDH. Like, there's a lot of similarities between the two formats. There's also that much more you can do, you know, grow. Like, actual combat is like a viable strategy in competitive. You know, we have Dargos that are attacking. We have Guts that are attacking with armies of skeletons. There's so many options that, you know, cEDH is, you know, combo focused, and there's plenty of that in cPDH too. Izlain, you touched on the money component, and maybe Gator wants to talk about this too. The decks are relatively cheap. The few expensive cards, like, they're not even necessarily played in every deck. You have like Lotus Petal, you have Snuff Out, you have Oubliette, and those are some of like the more expensive cards I can think of off the top of my head.
Promo foil Priest of Titania.
I mean, if you're blinging stuff out, that's, you know, that's your problem.
On you.
But, compared to like multiple $100 cards, like you're getting like $20 cards at the top end of things. Zhao Dun as a commander, if you want to do that, I guess that's the flex you could do, and that's the exception, I suppose. From a monetary perspective, you know, even if something were to get banned, it's not nearly as devastating as, you know, we saw in this like EDH case of, you know, multiple $100+ cards, or, you know, nearing $100+ cards getting axed, and just collection values plummeting, and, you know, the fallout that comes with that.
And there's also something that Gator can speak a lot to. But like what I've seen, I've done a lot of commentary for tournaments in this format. I do commentary for Bobby's tournaments. I've done some for RIW Hobbies tournaments up in Livonia, Michigan for a couple of years now. And like a lot of what I see in tournaments is when you play the format, if you're gonna be doing super powerful combo stuff, great, that stuff is there. But you also have to be able to play like a game of Magic until you get to that point, which makes it a completely, like, I think, unique mental exercise playing tournaments in this format. Oh, I mean, some decks you can, but in most of them you just can't, like, you know, A/B instant combo. You have to actually like play Magic, which is awesome. Like all Magic, like you play on the stack, you play in combat, you kind of utilize the whole buffalo, you know, when you're playing. It's really cool.
You guys kind of already alluded to what I was doing. The first thing I wanted to actually bring up for the format specifically, which cEDH does not have. I mean, you can have a few that'll argue that it does, but there's nothing like a true aggro deck in the format. And, you know, Bobby kind of already pointed towards that. And we actually have decks that are dedicated to dealing combat damage, right? Which is exactly what Derek is saying here, right? Like, you need to understand how the combat phase functions, right? Very few people actually understand how that works, right? Because you just pass through it in a lot of these cEDH games. So, you know, unless you're a Tymna player, right, you know how it functions. But realistically, overall, you know, we're swinging over here with like a Dargo, right? People understand what that is.
Stacks players, no combat.
Few far in between of those at the current moment, but, you know, maybe some will come back, right?
It's coming back.
Yeah, exactly. So aggro is a realistic thing, right? We are going to turn our cards sideways, and I have lost many upon many games for not attacking for 1 point of damage. And that is 1 point of damage you find to be irrelevant in a 40, you know, life point game, but we're at 30 to begin with and at 16, just like Derek said. So like these things, this metric is lowered for us because of the way our cards are to begin with. Dargo's still a 7-power commander, right? We still have these beaters. We still, I played one of my first games today was Sfella, Ice Shaper. That was a blast to play. I lost miserably, but it was a super cool deck nonetheless, right? So you have these decks don't see the light of day in other formats that we actually get to appreciate and play here and do different things and actually understand where we have to okay, I'm going to do this into this. This is going to create this trigger. And we are actively playing the game, just like Derek said. I've lost countless games because I forgot to even go to main phase 2. I was just like, oh, I attacked. I guess I passed the turn. Oh, I have a second main phase. Hang on. I lose now because I forgot to even go to the step, right? Because, you forget these things when you're so active in the cEDH realm where you're like, okay, this needs to happen, right? Another big note I actually wanted to bring up to you, Izlain, which I think you guys would agree with. Bobby, I think you know a lot about this as well. The color spectrum, the color pie that we have in our format is a lot different than the way you would see in other formats, right? So like green, I could give like the easiest example, right? You're gonna be a cEDH player. You're gonna be used to playing like Court of Calling, Green Sun Zenith, right? All of these like Tudor style creature cards, and then you're gonna come into our format and expect green to do this similar thing.
Oh, it does.
Well, sorry, Charlie, that's not what we do in green in this format, right? So we have different metrics that our format abides by, which actually makes it far more interesting.
And
right?
I think right here is where we plug your recent discussion about the colors and their strengths and weaknesses.
Yes, we actually, so on the Common Theory, we recently did a kind of shorter video on the color pie. We went in Wooburg order, discussing the strengths of decks without combos. So what color has what to offer without comboing? Part of the reason we're doing this, and I think Izlain is kind of alluding to this because the next tournament that Bobby will be holding, the Common Theory is actually going to be playing a mid-range pile, and we are going to see what we could do and how we could push the format in a certain way. You don't need a combo to win games. Like, I am a firm believer and you don't have to have certain things. You just need a way to win the game. And the deck that we will be playing, which I won't spoil it here if Izlain would like to, he may. We have a ton of win conditions. There's infinite amount of ways to win the game in that deck. You name it, we could do it. And that's the greatest part about this format. We have certain ways to drain your life. We have certain ways to poke you. We don't even have to go to combat to make you lose the game. So I really appreciate decks. And it's just like Derek said earlier, you have to play the game of Magic, right? Going to combat is a real thing. Blocking, being able to do certain triggers, right? Knowing how a trigger works and how it functions. Here's my biggest hot take probably going to be my biggest hot take of the day. If you don't understand how trample works, you will have trouble playing this format. Ironically, I know that is a weird statement. The key word that I've had the most conversation about through my years of playing Pauper have been on trample. As crazy as that sounds.
So what's the misunderstanding?
Good example, like recently we got Alexios, right?
Yeah.
That's a card that had a lot of hype around it because it beats everyone to death super fast in a way that's kind of unprecedented outside of Dark Oketis stuff. But there was a conversation shown on this card where what you can do is you can collude with your opponents to when they attack with Alexios, you can assign, because it does trample damage, right? So you assign however much you need to do lethal and then the rest tramples over. You have the choice to assign all of that damage to the blocker and have 0 trample over. So there was some talk about that. That's one of a weird corner case for trample as an example that's been relevant recently. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can finagle it with Death Touch to do a lot of messed up things. That's more well known, but there's more ways you can take advantage of it than just setting up trampling Death Touchers and attacking into your opponents. You can do a lot of weird stuff with that. I play a lot of green cards, so I'm very, very interested in what you're doing, Gator. Green is my favorite color of the format. I play mono green decks till the cows come home.
I have another big point that I think we should definitely talk about because you kind of alluded to it earlier too, Derek. You were talking about the metric of drawing cards.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear you guys' opinions because part of what we did discuss in that video was the king of our format of drawing cards is no longer blue. Wizards is continuing Yeah. Well, Wizards is continuing to print these cards like the Deadly Disputes, right? The Evans Cards Insight. Like, we continue to get these Village Right effects, and they're not stopping. They've even gone on record and said they're going to continue to print these. So, a few years back, right, blue was definitively the dominant force of drawing cards, right? But now black has played catch up. And also, too, if we look at red, we have all of these swirl possibilities that have been printed. And I mean, they're absurd, highway robbery,
Plus, you got the impulsive draw,
Witch's
too,
Park.
which they keep printing.
Exactly. And they've also gone on record and said they're going to continue to do these, right? Because they're amazing for limited. So
that's a great
our
point.
format is going to continue to get these. So blue, how many ponders have we received in blue? 0, right? Like
There was
our
wasn't there
brainstorms
like
are
a
3 mana.
pondering mage thing that like happened at some point?
Yeah, it's a 5 mana
5
3/4.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last like great cantrip we got was like consider, or maybe there's one I'm missing. but-
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
Curate, I think, was the best
Oh,
one
sure.
in Strixhaven, but like, let's be
Mhm.
realistic, that's very few formats.
Yeah, 2 mana,
You would
yeah.
play index, right? So, I mean, what do you guys think, Bobby, Derek? Like, what are your guys' opinions on that? I'm not trying to make a hot take with that, but
Oh no! I think you're absolutely on the money, and I have a lot to say about card advantage in this format. So I'm gonna let Bobby take it first, so that I can run away with it after and go on as long as I need to.
Yeah, I don't have to follow up that. There's card advantage, looks different, but you have it in every color combination for the most part. You have to, comparing to cEDH where, card advantage is just, Ristics, Mystics, Ad Nauseas, massive quantities of cards that go to your hand. Here it's, more incremental, but it's also more redundant, which is nice because we don't have the tutors like you alluded to earlier. We have a handful of tutors. For the most part, they're relatively narrow, so that, you can't just tutor up whatever the heck you want on a whim. So you kind of rely on having redundant versions of, your card advantage spells, whether they're draw spells, whether they're engines, curiosity control, of previous cEDH notoriety, that you can do that in PDH too. You can put tandem soul bond a tandem lookout with a thermo alchemist and go to town. Draw 3 cards, cast a spell, draw 3 more cards. Well, their engines, their spells, their commanders. Oftentimes, commanders are a huge source of the card advantage in this format, because they're the only thing you always have every game. I like it because it lets every color kind of shine. I wouldn't, obviously, people love playing blue, people love playing whatever, Derek loves playing green, I love playing green. I like, if you have preferences as far as, your favorite colors, your favorite kind of, styles of decks, in EDH and cEDH, you can find pretty close analogs in PDH most of the time. Obviously, like super unique commanders are super unique. There's not going to necessarily be a replacement for those. But on the flip side, there's also super unique commanders in PDH that, aren't legendary, that will open up a whole bunch of cool new stuff that,
I think
you
that's
didn't even know you were into.
biggest draw. Yeah, I think
is.
that's super cool. And also to point to what you were saying, that was the thing for me. It was like I brewed like Sivrus and Cloakwood Hermit, and because like that set had just come out, and I recognized that like these things were uncommons, and this was kind of cool synergies and things, and I was like, Pauper, boom. And it was like that was when I started playing Pauper. Like it was a weird just set of circumstances where I was like, I like this, but this isn't good enough for cEDH, and I want to find a place to play it, so I did. But it wasn't great. And then I met Gator, and then Gator was like, Malcolm Kedis, and I was like, I play Malcolm Kedis in cEDH, and he was like, so play it in Pauper, and I was like, wow. So I slapped a list together, fucking proceeded to spank him in Puzzle in a couple games, and I was like, sold. And then I played in a tournament and got shit on. But tournament experiences are a thing that is still relatively new to me because I popped my cherry with the first Sanctuary, and I'm about to play in 7 now. But I missed, I think, 3. I missed 1 or 2 of them. I don't recall, but I played in almost all of them. Anyhow,
do you mind, Derek, real quick, if I put a quick caveat on Bobby here?
Please.
Yeah, I know you're going to go on your incredibly long tangent. I don't want to interrupt you during that because I know you have something fantastic to say. But Bobby did specifically say your commanders are very important to our format, which is actually an incredibly relevant thing because that was one of the big things that was a problem and why those cards were banned. Because a lot of players were like, well, I never even got to cast my commander, or my commander wasn't relevant at all in the game, right? And so, with a few people here have said Malcolm already at this point. You don't want to play against a Malcolm in this format. You bolt it 3 or 4 times. Malcolm doesn't exist, and you're going to wound the deck and make it limp, right? So that's like an incredible thing that we actually have in our format where our commanders matter. That you want to actually play commander where you don't go, here's a Ristic, I sit behind this, I never need to cast whatever is actually in the zone. That does not exist in this format, right? You are actively wanting to play my Scholar of Ages, my Sphinx Summoner, my
However,
Talon,
I will
my
say
Estior.
that in cEDH there are plenty of lists that are commander-centric, but they typically still have that commander list combo that they can, have as an emergency outlet or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, for sure. 100% agree. But with that little tangent, Derek, please take it away.
Yeah, and just to put a cap on that, if you think about it, like our commanders in this format are entire rarity step above the rest of your deck. So there's going to be like a significant power level increase from like what you're doing in the 99 to your commander, which is like another reason why they're just so important. They're so much more powerful in most cases. But yeah, like card advantage in this format, it like we've touched on, right? It's very incremental. It comes from a lot of different places you might not expect, and like a lot of the cards we're talking about, like the real possibility, corrupted conviction. These are cards where you have to discard a card, sacrifice a thing to draw 2 cards. So you're trading like 2 for 2, right? Like you lose an onboard resource, you lose a card in your hand, you replace them with 2 cards to your hand. Thrill possibility, you discard a card, draw 2 cards. So you're casting the thrill, discarding a card, drawing 2 cards. What is great about this format are the ways that you break parity with these effects, and you turn them into like raw, sort of like virtual card advantage at worst, and just like up cards in your hand at best. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. Like a couple really good examples. One is a deck that I play a lot, that I'm a big believer in the competitive space, is Dragon's Rage Channeler. For those of you who are not familiar with the card, so 1 red, 1/1.
cEDH players should be.
Yeah, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you surveil 1. If you have Delirium, it gets +2/+2, and it flies and attacks every turn. But basically, like, you're turning all of these cantripping spells into a surveil, a scry in many cases. You can set up all of your thrills because you put it on the stack, you discard your card. Do you want the card on top? No, pitch it, get another redraw, what you're doing, whereas you're not going up on cards pretty much ever, you're always making sure that the card on top of your library is going to be better than what your opponents are drawing, which is a form of card advantage, right? Like if I'm drawing 10 cards a game and they're all hitters, and you're drawing 20 cards a game and half of them are lands, then I'm in a better position, right? Like my cards are just better. And that's like a really good example of how like choosing your commander can really influence how effective these cards can be. As far as like green X decks, I think Cloakwood Hermit is a really underappreciated card. It generates a lot of virtual card advantage in the sense that like it turns all of your land cyclers. For those of you who don't know, it's a background, gives your commander the ability at the end of your turn, if a creature went to your graveyard from anywhere, you make 2 tapped 1/1 scroll tokens. So you're generating onboard resources for something entering your graveyard. You can mill it, you can discard it, it can just die on the battlefield. But you can land cycle, pitch a generous ent to your graveyard, get a land to your hand, play the land, end of your turn, make 2 squirrels. That's what you do in Sivris. I have a Viconia Drow Apostate Cloakwood Hermit deck that does the same thing. It's all land cyclers, cycling creatures. You rebuy your creatures every turn with Viconia's trigger. It's like an Oversold Cemetery, but a random card. And you make 2 scrolls for free. So you're just hitting all of your land drops. You're making 2 scrolls every turn, and then you're just drawing 2 cards every turn. One of them is a creature out of your graveyard. There's a lot of ways to find how to highlight these cards best. Obviously, we know like the black sacrifice draw effects. Tons of things in black you want to be sacrificing.
But black also has that counterpart where there's a lot of recursion as well.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You have those grave flickers and things where you're like, okay, cast this spell targeting this thing, but then grave flicker it so it bounces back. And you don't even lose the creature, and you drew the 2 cards and get all the resources.
You've got all those scam spells. Like, there's so much room to maximize how these cards operate. On their face, they're good. In in a creative deck, they are insane and just generate so much more than just 2 cards. Like, I can't tell you how many times where I've played Dragon's Channeler where I'll cast like a thrill effect and like I'll draw 2 cards, but I know that like next turn I can recover from someone Tormod's crypting me and like achieve delirium on my next turn because I have like a cycle land on top of my library. You know, like those sorts of things. But yeah, I'll leave it there. I think that's enough food for thought to chew on.
Let me hit you with this. I'm gonna pick on Bobby if you guys don't mind here in a quick second. But
I would encourage you to pick on Bobby.
So what you were saying was absolutely beautiful. So I love that because essentially what you were stating there is that we're building engines, right?
Yep.
And these cards are so like I'm gonna poke at Cerberus because you guys spoke about Cerberus as well and Viconia as well. Like if you have these cards that just say, you know, you have this 1/1 vanilla that says when it dies, it creates another 1/1 vanilla creature, right? I'm not going to go through the amount of creatures that we have in the format that actually do that, but that's what we have in this format. So you're creating this engine where you go, sack this, replace itself, and you're doing exactly what you said, where you're developing this card engine, and you're creating this dynamic to where your virtual cards are becoming raw cards now at this point, because 1 card's 2 cards, 2 cards, 4 cards, and you create this incredibly beautiful dynamic.
And it changes as the game shifts too. Like as life totals get lower, it shifts because of the synergy that Cerberus has with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that people start just giving you whatever you're drawing. So then you just have pure card advantage because they're like, I can't afford to lose 3 life. And then you start to snowball out of control. Hopefully finding that finisher and ending the game, which is what we might be aiming to do soon.
Yep. Exactly. And then the one I actually wanted to poke at Bobby for, which I know Bobby knows this one quite well, is Aranus Street Urchin, which is another form of building an engine. Yeah. Right? Those thrill possibilities in a deck like Aranus Street is, I mean, Bobby, you want to just take it away and explain how ridiculous those cards are by discarding lands?
Yeah, I mean, Aranus...
Before you start, shout out to Aranus, one of the best cards in the format as far as I'm concerned. Card's absolutely insane.
Yep.
Yeah, Aranus is one of the commanders that has choose a background. It's a 3 mana, 2 and a green, 3/3 with Death Touch, and when it attacks, you can return target land card from your graveyard to your battlefield. So, in like that deck, so Aranus Street Urchin, its whole game plan is machine gunning everyone's everything over the course of the game, and just with Street Urchin, which allows you to sacrifice a creature or artifact to use your commander to ping something. And when Aranus has Death Touch, that means it dies. Yeah, in that deck, you're looting away lands, rummaging them away, or you're sacrificing them to stuff like, you may sack it to like a Thunderclap, so you have a free interaction spell, or like a Grabby Giant, which lets you sacrifice lands to draw cards, and then you just get to put that land. It's ramping while netting you card advantage. I've had games where I've played Aranus against like a Hollow Marauder deck that's all about making your opponents discard cards. And I got to just ramp. They literally just helped me ramp my lands from my hand by putting them in my yard for me, right? So depending on the colors, depending on what your commanders are doing, card advantage it's not just quantity of cards in hand anymore, which is like the most common way people kind of think about card advantage or look at card advantage, especially when we're talking cEDH and ad nauseas.
With cEDH, there is a perfect analog there too with like the Paco Halden or Evelyn or some of the other commanders that do steal and put cards into a special zone that are just there to access Dothian Voidwalker, etc., etc. But yes, continue.
Yeah, so I mean, they're analogs, but I guess the traditional whenever you say card advantage, people just assume that means drawing cards, right? So
the one ring, right? Something like that.
Yeah, and there's just so many more ways because we're dealing with commons and uncommon commanders. Like it's just not going to be the same. We're not going to have those grossly overpowered effects. We have plenty of powerful effects, but they're not drawing half our deck, in one shot, right?
Right.
And so, it's just finding ways to figure out what card advantage means other than that, whether it's, filtering your draws like with Dragon's Channel or taking advantage of what are normally, downsides of cards, whether that's discarding or whatever, and turning them into, positives. And there's so many cool ways to do that, we're still, I mean, there's still so much unexplored, and people are finding
It's the
new cool
Wild
ways
West
every day.
for real.
Yeah.
It's a lot about finding the resources that matter to what you're trying to do, and then just going as crazy as possible to get as many of them as you can. Like Aranis, for example, like you just want things to be able to kill other people's things, and that's a deck that wins with combat damage. Like that's a deck where you're just going to have to attack people to death with your big old beaters. Or Aranis, because she's a 3/3 and has Death Touch, and she'll just kill people sometimes. But there's decks that care about just like generating tons of mana, and those decks do that very, very well, and their cards are designed to get them ahead in that resource. There's decks that need creatures on the battlefield, like tokens or other fodder to do things, and they are very good at generating excess amounts of those resources. There's cards that just want a bunch of things in hand, like combo decks that just want to protect what they're doing. And those decks are always very good at doing that.
So I just wanted to play on what you're saying. Like, I think two fantastic examples, what you're saying, right? Decks that don't have combos in our format, I think that are two completely polar opposites to bring up is a deck like Dargo Ketis, right? This is a deck that's blistering fast, trying to kill the table, can kill the table. I'm not saying it does this all the time, but as fast as turn 3, right? Its average is turn 5, turn 6, right? But then you have the polar opposites, which is purely combat based, right? But then you have another purely combat based deck as Tormod and Ghost Ramirez, right? So we have this deck that's disturbingly slow, but the incremental advantage that this deck has is beautiful, right? Like you're using Ghost to discard cards, to transmute cards, to continue to revive them and bring them back and consistently push your opponents underneath is absolutely amazing, right? So if you're the guy that likes to go blistering fast, boom, we have that for you. If you're the one that wants to sit back behind their wall of zombies and control the table, have your unblockable creature and continue to counter everything every single opponent does, guess what? We have that for you as well. So like I don't see where you could honestly go wrong if you pick a deck in this format. Maybe, it might not be good in the current meta, but that doesn't mean you can't adapt it to become better in the format, because something I know we didn't speak about was that our combos in our format are not like Thoracle, like Demonic Thoracle. We don't have something along that metric.
Everything is interactable.
Yeah, we lose, like our combos lose to Lightning Bolt. So, if you want to play destroy target creature, like, you want to play murder, you will be able to stop every combo in the entire format with a murder. Which is, I understand, not the flashiest thing on the planet.
You're not going to play that card, but you could.
Yes, exactly, right? I'm not telling you to play that card, but that card will stop every combo in our format, which is...
But that's the thing, is that same snobbery that I just sarcastically put forward, is a cEDH thing, like, murder, or it's like cancel, cancel, like, you don't pay 3 mana for a counter spell, we pay 1 mana, or it's free.
Yeah. There's a lot of
that same thing kind of goes over to Pauper, competitive Pauper as well, though. Is like you're still not playing murder. There are better options. It's kind of funny.
We do play murder, so let me.
If you want to go deep, you can play murder.
I mean, I guess
we do play murder. I do know a black deck that does play murder because it loses to loyal subordinate, and it needs to kill a loyal subordinate because all the best mono black cards we have, ironically, say non-black creature.
Yeah, that's true. No, okay, I guess you're right.
Yeah, that is very relevant.
I didn't think about that.
We have some really weird things, to say the least. But
all right, well, foot and mouth moment over. Whoever was up, continue.
Well, no, and that's interesting. You bring that up, like the non-black clause is I think a really good example of how the amount of redundancy we have for these baseline effects at common. Like, I use this example a lot when I talk about the format, but like it's one of the most interesting aspects in terms of being like a good deck builder is looking at all of the cards that say like counter target spell, right? Like there's a million of these things that get printed all the time, but each one is going to be different in different scenarios, and that changes all the time. Like there are times when like negate is going to be what you want. There could be environments where like essence scatter is better, and you just play that instead. Like those decisions exist. If you're playing removal spells, you play murder because it can kill any creature, not just a non-black creature. We don't have access to like deadly rollick and all of these things that just kill whatever you want for free.
Sure.
Like those riders matter. When we have fight spells, there's the bites, the creature deals damage equal its power to another creature. You have fight spells. You have fight spells that make treasure. You have fight spells that cost less if you have a creature with a 1/1 counter. Like, there's so many different versions of these effects that are different in so many, that are good in so many different places. I've been thinking about like Lotleth Troll as a commander recently, right? Like a 2/1 for Golgari colors, discard a creature, put a 1/1 counter on it, it regenerates, it tramples. It's just a big beater that you can do graveyard stuff with. But like cards like Mutant's Prey and Titanic Brawl are fight spells that they're 1 mana fight spells if you target a thing that has a 1/1 counter on it. So it's just like a 1 mana kill your creature. With a Lotleth Troll, that's, it's easy to get up to like 5 power.
No.
It just kills so many things. And I wouldn't play, Prize Fight in that deck, maybe. That's a fight spell that generates a treasure token. But like those two are so much head and shoulders better above that card. There's no reason for me to. So like these little riders matter a lot. And that's one of my favorite parts of deck building is anticipating an environment and then picking the best interactive spells to go there.
Yeah, you have to build with a lot more intent. Like, you have to have intent and like know what you're worried about. Have a game plan, think about it, and that can change week to week or month to month or tournament to tournament or whatever, or play group to play group, like, and deck to deck. You don't just when you think of blue decks and cEDH, you're like, all right, force will, force negation, pact negation, fierce guardianship, we're playing all those. Whereas here you're like, counterspell isn't even always a given that you're going to play it. Like, Spell Pierce isn't. Like, very few cards are a given, which I know is something all of us have talked about in various places over various times, and I think we're all generally in agreement with. Like, you don't just have the same. Like, yes, there's going to be lots of cards shared from deck to deck, but there's not like a auto include, like, in terms of interaction in every single deck if it's within a color. There's a lot more that goes into it because of all these like specifics on the the restrictions or limitations on the various spells.
So, Bobby, exactly what you were talking about, the staple package. I completely agree with that. You're right. We have actually gone on record. I think all of us here have gone on record about that. I mean, we have some cards that people have argued for, right, in blue decks, like Counterspell. I've won games in various places where I play blue deck and I don't actually have counterspells or counterspell in my deck, but people just assume because I leave 2 mana up that I have it. So, like, it's ironic because
valid threat assessment, sort of,
Yes, I completely agree, but like we don't have that, like, that generic true staple, right? Every blue deck in our format can play Gitaxian Probe. And I can guarantee you, if you pull up every blue deck in our format right now that sees results, it does not have Gitaxian Probe.
But I mean, that is like the number one bluff, just right? Like in poker or something. It's the number one bluff, is that you leave up 2 mana and you might have a counterspell because you're in fucking blue. So, like, that's universal across all formats. This 60 card doesn't matter where you're at. If you're a blue player and you leave up 2 islands, it's a meme for a reason, right? So,
but I mean, doesn't that bring us back to like the original metric of saying like our colors don't always abide by the colors that are known in like cEDH, right? Like our black doesn't abide by the black there, right? Like blue is our tutor color in this format, or black is the tutor color there, right? And then the same with green versus white, right? Like, so.
Well, transmute. It's blue and black.
Just a handful, but
yeah.
It's more, but in blue you have things in this format like you have the transmute spells, but you also have wizard cycling.
And you have
also have, like, merchant scroll.
Merchant scroll. Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then like red, red is actually, I would say, our smoothest brained color still of this format. Like, I think it's the easiest translatable because it's still like burn your face, right? It's still doing the same thing. Excluding red, like white isn't doing the same thing, right? White is essentially 1995 white. That's what we have in this format. Maybe you guys don't agree with me with that statement, but
I'm kind of with you there, because cEDH white has come way up. Their stocks have been on the up for a couple years now.
Like, as far as like interactive spells, like in red, for example, like it's probably like the best interactive like color in the format as far as like removing creatures. Like a shock will kill most competitive threats that you want to kill. It'll kill your Malcolms, it'll kill your Weavers, it'll kill any number of support creatures, and it's shock. Like there are so many iterations of this card that are so much better than that, and they're all playable.
Well, and then you get to the competitive side of it, where like in cEDH you want that free, like that deflecting swat. In parallel, when you're in cPDH, you've got like your thunderclap where you sack a mountain, and you've got a free do the thing. And there are actually a surprising amount of those. I've come to find out, having played for a couple years now. So there are a lot of parallels between the two formats, I think, and I think that a lot of people who may be dissatisfied with those bans and or just dissatisfied with the format in general for whatever reason, instead of fully selling out and saying, screw this this hobby that I spent years of my life on, yada yada yada. I think a lot of us too. I don't know about you guys. I know me and Gator are kind of close in age, but having sold out before, it sucks. Like when you come back to the game and you're like, man, I had all these cards and I sold them, and now I got to start over, and then these kinds of bans come around, and then your collection gets nerfed and blah blah blah. Like there's just like a roller coaster of things that can happen with all of it. But Pauper is kind of like that. It's like comfort food. Like it's that thing that's there. It's like mom's cooking. It's always there. It's reliable. Like it might not be the best shit. Sometimes it's kind of greasy, but like, it's mom's cooking. It was cooked with love. And cPDH is here for you when you want to get that like cheap homemade greasy meal. That's a bad metaphor, maybe, but you guys get what I'm putting down.
We can be your cheap greasy meal. I mean, one of the attractive things for me, as both a player and somebody who kind of like has a much larger view of the format, is the rate at which cards are introduced to this format is a little bit more rapid than cEDH. Obviously, we get like new cards every standard set release, every ancillary set release, but also reprint sets also infuse new cards into the format, and they always change things in a big deal because downshifts exactly, or upshifts in some cases. Like for example, with Modern Horizons 3. Modern Masters 3 was a long time ago. Yeah, Modern Horizons 3, not only did we get like a ton of great new commons, Horizon sets are always the best for the format just because it's like all new cards, but the upshifts, like Priest of Titania was upshifted from a common to an uncommon, now it's a legal commander. It was not before.
I never even thought of that.
Yep. Commander Masters, we got some downshifts like Eudora Gravegardener, a card that I like quite a bit. Tishar, Ancestor's Apostle, a couple others. Whereas cEDH might not get new cards with these sets, we do. And whenever they downshift cards in those products, it opens a lot of doors in the format. The Horizon sets and the reprint sets in particular. We get a lot of new toys, and the format is constantly changing, constantly evolving. We've touched on this a few times before, but like it's relatively unexplored as far as like a competitive,
it's far
play.
From solved, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's people out here doing the good work, like Gator, one of our most winningest tournament players. Bobby is brewing decks 24/7, and like there's a lot of people just like that are just constantly running the numbers and figuring out what works, because we don't have an idea of, we don't have like a list of things that are just like, it's solved. Here you go. Do what you want to do. There's tons of room for innovation, tons of room to kind of make your mark. It's really exciting. It's a really good place right now.
I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, just to kind of touch back on like the numbers, just for so people know, like the average price of like decks that you could get in. I mean, we're looking at like anywhere between like $30 to $50. That's how much you're going to have to spend to get a deck. And I mean, I'm talking about just generic, normal cards, and your deck could be
no special printings.
Right. Yeah, no special printings. But
cheapest versions.
Yeah, but if you want to bling your deck out, me and my group of friends down here in Florida, each one of us have a foil deck, and our decks rank like commons are ironically one of the most funniest things when you go from a normal common is a quarter to that same card foil is $30, right? And I mean, it's like Suture Priest is just a prime example of a card that's like $2 normal, and then you get it foil and it's like 30, and you're just like, what? Okay,
they
sure.
did do. I think they probably did kind of a lot for the market with some of the like the list, I know, but it was originally like the mystery boosters, and then it became the list after that, where there was a lot of like commons that you would get in. Because I bought a few boxes of mystery boosters, and like I got a fuck ton of common foil printing. So there has been some effort, I guess, on their shit, I mean, what is that? Yeah. That's probably like 5 years ago, so never mind, not defending them at all.
Yeah.
They have not done it well enough, but there have been some of those.
There's tons of ways to personalize your decks. You can do all that, and even most of the time, it's not going to break the bank. Like my Heritage Druid deck is like my baby. It's the one deck that I will never take apart. I'm constantly finding new ways to make it do its thing better. I have like Selvat cards, like White Border, Modern Frame, Elves from Onslaught, like these really janky printings. Hunting these things down, it's just a fun thing to do, and then none of them are very expensive because it's a Pauper deck, But yeah, there's tons of ways you can personalize. Foils are insane. Like if you want to get like a foil Daze or Snuff Out or Gush or whatever, then that's where you're going to hit a little bit of a hurdle. But by and large, like you can really do some fun things on a limited budget. I love that.
Speaking of limited budget, as much as the cEDH community has been generally favorable with, at least in online spaces and even most LGSs to this point, are mostly proxy friendly, cPDH people are generally the same. Nobody really cares. Like, if you don't have the $50 to buy your thing because you're a starving college student, like, don't worry about it. Like, play on Moxfield, proxy it, do whatever you gotta do.
Okay, so there's a little bit of a caveat to that. Is like some of these cards are a pain in the ass to find because they're just so old and like no one has one, right? Like
that too.
You have these like very specific printings of cards that just never ever get reprinted because they're kind of almost like a mistake, like a standard bearer, right? It's like an easy example where just very few players understand, and I'm not, we're not saying like people don't understand cards, but like this is a difficult card to understand.
Well, Ristic Study at Common was a mistake. Honestly,
multiplayer didn't exist at that point, right? So like
it didn't matter. Yeah. It was still kind of it's kind of crazy.
A good example of kind of cards you talk about, like Tortured Existence is another good one.
Exactly.
Like a really powerful engine card that just has never seen a reprint in any way that is meaningful because it's just like a weird. It's never going to reprint it at Common again. If Gadfix reprinted, it's not going to be a Common. I can guarantee you that. Yeah, the mistakes are fun. They had a lot of texture to the format, like the reasonable ones, not like Ristic and Mystic, but like Torture Existence is like a good example. That it's a build around card in 60 card Pauper. It's a build around card in this format too. Does a lot of cool stuff.
I just have always thought that like EDH itself as a whole was amazing because it's just the whole history of the game. Because I did play the game in the 90s, so I remember when some of those cards were like new. Like so like it was like, yeah, this is cool, but this was just like what it was at the time, so it was a whole different landscape. But then obviously evolution and whatnot, and then as I said, hashtag regret, fucking sold off everything and then started anew years later, and even still, like to this point, like I have sold off expensive pieces from my collection because it was like, hey, I got a builds due and I don't got the money for it, so bam, sell off some cards. We're a little over an hour here, so let's try to kind of put a cap on this and summarize. So, major selling points, financially, it's not a big barrier to entry. Strategically, it is the same sort of deck building challenge, strategy driven experience that you're looking for from this card game. It's on par turn-wise, especially now with those current bans having kind of pushed the winning turn back maybe a turn. So instead of it being like a quote-unquote turn 3, I mean, there's literally channels called Team Turn 3 because turn 3 was like the thing. That's what made it cEDH, was that you won by turn 3 at the latest. Now that it's not that, maybe it's it's a turn 4 format, maybe turn 5. Like that's cPDH as well, right? It's not every deck. It's not every deck. A lot of decks are you can't just go into it thinking like, I'm gonna come in there and I'm gonna wreck face and I'm just gonna combo off, blah blah blah. It's a definitely like a whole different landscape. And if you are coming from cEDH, or even just the more casual leaning EDH sphere, so to speak, there's a little bit of a learning curve. As someone who went from casual to competitive to like, I want to branch out and try Pauper, I went into it like, I don't want to say arrogant, but yeah, arrogant. I went into it like, oh, I know how to build decks. I build decks all the fucking time. Like, I literally build cEDH decks in like 30 minutes. Like, bam, 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 bam. Because it's just, whatever your colors are, here's the staples, here's the flavor, bam, deck, done. Easy. Been doing that for years, and the decks will have some sort of results. Obviously, playtesting, you tweak, you adjust, you do what you gotta do, but cEDH is not exactly solved, but it's got its staple list to the point where you're only actually having like 30 cards of flavor, and the rest is lands and shit that's staples, right?
Yeah, the win conditions are more established, certainly, yeah.
Right. So, generally speaking, it's kind of easy to build lists. So I went into my transition into playing competitively on the Pauper side of things was like, I could do this in my sleep. So, bam, 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 here are all these decks, blah. I brewed like 5 lists or something, and I started playing, and I got some feedback that was like, yeah, that seems like kind of okay, but like maybe do this, maybe do that, blah, blah, blah. Didn't really have the breakout success that I thought I was going to have. Didn't really know what I was doing because I didn't know what the threats were. I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know what interaction I needed to counter. I didn't know the meta, basically. So, lots of reps, and I think I played for over a year before I got my first win. Granted, I didn't play every day. It was a once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times a month kind of endeavor for like the first year. But then when I finally got my first win, Gator was there. Beat him.
Yeah,
with a deck that he fucking hates too. I love it. But yeah, I got that first win, and then after that it was like, okay, I got it, and then it like just something went like, and it made sense. So don't expect to make the jump and just immediately get it. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. It doesn't matter if you're a competitive whatever player. Now, if you're a competitive 60-card Pauper player, then I think you probably have enough experience to know that little extra bit that I wouldn't have known, to where you could be like, okay, this translates better. I did have the sage advice from people like Gator who said, like, play Malcolm Caddis, and I was like, oh, ding, 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 and then, yeah. So, the rest was history, but I think if you are interested, if any of this sparked any interest, tons of links down below. There's plenty of other videos to watch to get more information. I just wanted to kind of shine some light on this format because I think if you're kind of sick of the drama that has surrounded the competitive EDH sphere the last month-ish, then this is a place that maybe you might call home. And if not, you can just dip your toes in it. If you don't like it.
Or you can just vacation there every now and then.
Yeah. I try to do it on my channel once a month, It is a nice little vacation spot. So that's basically all we have for today. Gentlemen, any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
If you are interested and want to jump in head first, Sanctuary is having a tournament here in just 2 weeks. I don't know exactly when this is going to be released, but a little under 2 weeks whenever this makes its way public.
This should be live within the next day or two, and so within 2 weeks, I'm going to be there. I think that guy's going to be there. I don't know about you. He's hosting.
I'm planning on commentary.
All right, I'll be chatting about it.
Most of us gonna be there.
But yeah, go to sanctuarypdh.com. Like Izlain said, all the links will be, I'm sure, in the description and whatnot. $17 tournament, play via spell table. You can use a virtual setup. You can use real cards. You can use proxies. You're playing for money. Money goes in, money goes out. It's that cool. And then the winner gets to make a cool token, too. Gator won the most recent one and a few other ones. And so he had a food token we just released. It's a fun time.
One of those. Actually, I need to get like a handful of those for Sivrus.
Yeah. But I'll see you in Vegas, so that'll be fine. Also tying to that, I think at least I'm going to be in Vegas. Derek's going to be in Vegas. Izlain's going to be in Vegas. And I know Derek and I are going to be playing PDH most of the time. I'm sure Izlain will be playing both.
I'm going to bring a mixture of both. I only have currently in paper for Pauper, I only have Sivrus and Malcolm Caddis, but I was going to try and build at least like a couple more. And then on the competitive side of EDH, I don't know. I've got decks in paper, but like I just have to do some updates, especially after the bans. I've updated everything on Moxfield, but I haven't updated anything in paper yet. So I've got what, like 3 weeks, so
Yeah, you got some time.
yeah, we got some time, but it's probably gonna be like last minute. Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
If you are interested, there will be plenty of people there with decks there. You look for the big Pauper Commander banner. We'll all be around there, and I'll have decks I can lend out. I'm sure Derek will have decks he can lend out, and everyone, if you just want to like try it for the first time and you're going to be in Vegas, come find us. It'll be a good fun time.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be hanging out around that area, and I'm open also for LFGs, but we'll be around.
I just wanted to hit you with the only one of the Common Theory guys is going to be there. Kunks will actually be going to Vegas with you guys, and we're going to be sending him with at minimum 13 decks. So if you think you need to build decks this lane, you will not. He'll have at minimum 13 different decks on him at all points in time.
I didn't realize Franklin was making it.
Yes, so he'll be out there, and so we'll be taking some footage. He'll be out there with at least a GoPro tour of mine and or his, and be taking some vids, trying to get some games, trying to get some videos with everybody, and trying to say hello to the community. So
yeah,
nice.
Definitely wanted to throw that out there for you guys because he'll be there awesome. And trying to have a great time. So
that's sweet.
Gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for being stewards of the format and lending me your voices. Yeah. So yeah, if you guys are interested in checking out this format, tons of links down below. Also, I would love it if you would hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Maybe check out my Patreon. It's been a little crickety lately, so to speak. So yeah, every little bit helps. I'm trying to put out more content lately, gentlemen.
Sorry.
Once again, thank you so much for joining. Everybody, check out all of these guys' content. They put out amazing stuff. Their guests, their hosts, their
whatever I do.
Just overall great humans.
Yeah.
They read stuff. They respond to stuff. They talk to people. They're on social media. They play games. Remarkably, these guys actually are fierce fucking competitors too. I have lost to so many the first time I played Bobby's Floodgate. What is this fucking bullshit? And then proceeded to lose to it, and I was like, what the fuck was that? So yeah, perfect outro, and I've got at least a couple bloopers in there, so perfect. Alright guys, we're gonna call it there. Everybody, like, subscribe, comment, hit us up, follow us, hit these guys up, follow them. We'll see you next time. Have a good night, evening, day, week, month, year. Happy New Year.
Bye, everybody.
Later.